Hello and welcome to this Disruptive Innovation Festival 2014 Hangout as part of the Festival Lab stage. We're lucky enough to be joined by Jean-Michel Molnar today. He's broadcasting to us from a very busy Fab Lab in Grenoble, where he is the manager of the Fab Lab. Jean-Michel took part in the creation of the first Fab Labs in the Netherlands and has followed courses from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and that coordinate the Fab Lab network around the world. I could speak more on the Fab Lab movement and the significance that this might play in a future circular economy. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation has been interested in just this topic for the past year and attended Fab 10 in Barcelona to explore this relationship. But I will hand over now to Jean-Michel, who can provide a much better explanation than me, and we'll talk you through the subject of this talk, which is the Fab Economy.
Thank you, Joe, and I'd like to thank you and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation for allowing me to speak today. I think it's a great opportunity on a very innovative festival. It's nice the way you organize it. I think there's many similarities in the way you seem to be thinking and organizing, and the way we are trying to organize our new company that I'll shortly talk about. I'll quickly introduce myself. You already did some of it. As you said, I'm from Holland originally, where I helped notably the Waag Society, which is one of the first companies in Holland that opened a Fab Lab in Amsterdam. That's still a very inspirational and successful lab. And I got to do a boot camp in Norway in one of the biggest labs back then on the planet, that was run by the MIT, from where comes the idea of Fab Lab. So the MIT has a professor, Neil Gershenfeld, who noticed that his students needed to make stuff, who needed to get things out of their head and into their hands, so to say, make them physical. And so he put in place a course that was called How to Make Almost Anything, and it's still running. And for that, he installed a Fab Lab, a fabrication laboratory. So this is basically a low-cost, relatively low-cost collection of digitally controlled machines with which we can truly almost make anything. In the beginning, this was just in the States, and it has gradually spread all over the globe, and there's now, depending on how you look at it, between 200 and 300 Fab Labs spread all over the globe. And the interesting thing is that we share knowledge, tools, and processes in a very deep level. But we do try to create a locally relevant place. So while we here in Grenoble, in our Fab Lab, we are in a science center, La Casemate, one of the first science centers of France. Well, here in our Fab Lab, we have the same tools as, for instance, Kamau Gachingi in Nairobi or Wendy Neal in New Zealand. We do things that are locally relevant for our community. So tonight we'll be teaching people how to build skateboards and longboards, and we're working on the possibility to come into the lab and to build skis. We're probably not going to build skis that are better than the ones that Rossignol is building not far from here, but we'll be showing people how to use different technologies to make something personalized and create really interesting products that they can use in their daily life. So since all those Fab Labs have similar tools, and we can all now, as we're doing now, communicate via video conference, it also brought the idea of the Fab Academy. So from the boot camp I did a long time ago, sprang the Fab Academy, which is now a course given by Neil Gershenfeld globally. So you can follow this here in Grenoble or in India or anywhere in the States. You follow the classes via video conference. You do your homework locally with a Fab Academy guru, that's me here, and then you present your work via video conference, and you can actually get a diploma from the MIT without ever going to Boston, which is a very transformative idea for us. Also because, you know, it's quite far travel. At a certain point, I got in more and more in contact with a lot of people from Fab Labs from all over the globe, and I noticed that we all have the same issues. We're all struggling, finding funds, finding enough money to keep our labs open, and although there's a lot of people doing it, helping us for free, and really believing in the concept, just like me and many others, we always need money. To be very blunt about it, you always need funds to buy machines, to pay people, to get materials. So we started thinking with a small group of people me here in France, Fiore Basile in Italy, Francisco Sanchez in Spain, and Chris Wilkinson, who recently joined our company in the UK, about how we could create something that would help Fab Labs as a global system and not just individual labs. So no longer thinking, how could I help my own lab survive in my own city, but how could we create things that would work for multiple Fab Labs and that would have them work together in multiple configurations. If I can quote a sentence from the video that's actually on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation page, I believe it's on the page for the Circular Economy 100. In the end of the video, it said, individual people with individual businesses will struggle to implement a circular economy, but working together they can. And we believe that the same goes for Fab Labs, in the sense that we can change the way we produce, we consume energy, materials, while working together as a network of Fab Labs and not as a single spot. So we noticed that multiple people were working on things like this, and when we were in Barcelona recently, we spoke about it with the people from MIT, Neil notably, and he said it would be nice if we could create a wrapper around that, if we create something that would be a platform for this new kind of economy. So I'll just share my screen with you to show what we created. There we go. You can see my screen now, I believe. So what we created was a page that is fabeconomy.com. And just for the people who know what Fab Labs are, you might not know that the logo of the Fab Labs, the red, green, and blue logo, actually stands for the .edu, so Fab Academy, the .org, so the Fab Foundation, and now the .com part of things. And so we are trying to be the .com part in that sort of network, that ecosystem of Fab Labs. So it is about, as it said on the page, a new economic paradigm for everyone, to create a new way of working. Instead of building something in one spot and distributing it around the globe, we design globally and we build locally. And so what we build is a portal that we hope is going to be filled with more companies than is the case now, and more organizations is the case now, that all want to join this movement that also inscribes itself in the idea of the circular economy. So we really want to do well, let's say, for the planet and for the labs. So when you arrive here, you can say, okay, I'm an individual and I actually want to start a new Fab Lab. Well, that would bring you to the Fab Foundation. You might find yourself being a Fab Lab and you're actually looking for sponsoring. Then you are going to Fab Lab Connect, which is an organization run by Simone Amber. And they are focusing more on ideas that actually come from within the Fab Lab and helping them find funding. What I and the people I just spoke about are working on with our company that is called Fab Connections is finding solutions to problems, getting experts and knowledge into companies and into Fab Labs both ways, and helping companies and Fab Labs and organizations connect more. So I'll just quickly show our website, which is fabconnections.org. On the about, there's a little image that shows the idea. We are trying to be the hub between globally run projects between and in Fab Labs, existing and new companies, sponsors, nonprofit organizations, governmental organizations, and alumni. Again, with the idea in mind that an individual to be, for instance, get Horizon 2020 funding, but if we would work together with a bigger group and companies and organizations, we would be able to respond to calls. We would be able to create bigger platforms and bigger projects. And the idea with this is really that we, Fab Connections, to be very clear about it, we are a for-profit company. We are trying to make money, but we are trying to do this for the network. So our business model is such that we are going to pay the people we work directly with, so the Fab Labs and the individuals that we employ for different projects or that we'll work with on different levels. And then a part of the money that is going to be made is obviously going to stay in the company because the company needs to live. But a big part of the money is going to be invested back into the Fab Lab ecosystem, and that is not something that we want to decide on our own. So the idea we have is that the revenue we're going to generate, we're going to discuss with the Fab Foundation, with the people from the Fab Academy and with the thought leaders from the Fab Lab network, if you will, on how to invest that money correctly. To give you a few examples, there are already some projects out there that we absolutely love, like the maternity project in Nairobi, where they are trying to create products that can help mothers during the time of birth. There's a lot of lives lost during the time of giving birth, notably in Africa, and that often is because they just don't have the products to save the kids and often the mothers. And those are products we found that are actually quite simple to make in Fab Lab. So they started a project in which they're trying to help to get Fab Labs to help them to make these products and then distribute them, at least the designs, freely all across Africa and have them made locally in Fab Labs. I think that's a wonderful project. I can actually show you another one. Some projects that we are doing, we are working on what we call tourism and making. So the idea is to create workshops all over the globe and to have people go on a form of transformative trips. So maybe people want to go and visit Europe, and then instead of just visiting the cities, they can also learn how to build or use a 3D printer. They can learn how to use a laser cutter or make a drone, and they really get to learn a lot of things and not just travel the world. So we're working on the Fab Economy branch. Another thing we're working on is creating a form of a logo for Fab Labs to say that a product is made in a Fab Lab, and so it adheres to a certain charter saying it's made locally but designed globally, so the ideas and the designs are shared openly. It's made with local materials. It's made in a sustainable way. So we're working on all that. You know, we can save tons of CO2 emissions just by doing less transport of material, and we're really trying to work on that. There's some other projects that we're working together with and developing projects together with, so they're not ours. Just want to show you one. It's Enable. I just spoke about it to you, Joe. I just spoke to John Schul, who's running it. The idea is that they design prostheses for hands, and you can print them with any 3D printer you might have, and they give them away for free to people that need them. So what we might do with Fab Connections is try and have as many Fab Labs as possible print these hands, find funding for them, and help them give them away for free to kids and people actually needing prosthetic hands. Projects like this are really inspiring to us, and we're really trying to help these projects grow, and we realize that they often need funding. So the idea behind Fab Connections is really to create that. I'll just stop sharing my screen now. So to just go over the ideas we're working on, as I said, the maker tourism, we want to create workshops also, not just for tourism, but also for CEOs in companies to create a better understanding of what Fab Labs are, what they can do, and how this is changing the global economy, and how they can work together. Very interestingly, I've spoken to some people from different companies, and recently in Barcelona there were keynotes from very big companies, Airbus, Nike, and at the end both speakers said that they would love to work with Fab Labs. And I realized at that point that for an individual Fab Lab, it's actually going to be quite hard to contact these people in these big companies and provide them with solutions, because singular spaces often have little means and it's hard to get that together. But if we work together as a network of Fab Labs, again, we can offer these things, and we can help big companies even find solution to their problems. The logo thing we are working on is also a similar is a thing. As I said, it's based on another open source project we love, Arduino. There's Arduino inside logos that you can basically download and you can stick on your project. The idea is to do the same for the Fab Lab. So there's a logo saying that you are producing correctly and you're producing in a way that's good for our planet. And so you can stick the logo on there to say that you're part of the movement. So for now, we're still a small company. We're just starting this off for most of us next to the work we have in our daily life. So this is a lot of long evenings and long weekends for us for now. But we're really looking for more people to work with, looking for companies who are interested into learning more about the Fab Lab way of working. I know there's already quite some companies who are incorporating new ways of rapid prototyping, like we do in the Fab Labs. I actually have a very interesting example. I spoke a while ago with someone who works in Texas in a big semiconductor company. And he told me that normally he would do prototyping where he would design some of the integrated circuits on his computer, then send those design files to a company that would make some prototypes, 3 or 4, who would ship them back to him. So this is cost in shipping, cost in material, and it's lots of energy and time. He would test them. Often they were not well because you make mistakes in your first prototype. So he would iterate that process, and at a certain point he discovered that it was just too long. And so the idea that we use in Fab Labs is being able to prototype things locally very rapidly. He incorporated that in his office, and he simply installed a toaster oven, a thermometer, and he's now doing reflow soldering in his office for the very first prototypes to just make sure that when he sends out things, they at least work well on a certain level. And I think that's where we are in the Fab Lab world right now. I saw a question come by, what do you think the maker movement is in 20 years? Maybe we can talk about that in a more detail later, but I think one of the things is where the Fab Labs are right now is that right now we're saying that if you want to do 10 prototypes, you would do them yourself in a Fab Lab. If you would want 100, you would probably get some friends and you would pay them pizzas and a beer, and then you would make them with all of those people. But if you want 1,000, there's not yet a local solution for that, and you would still call a company in Shenzhen and would send your file there, and they would make it and ship it back, and you would redistribute it across the planet, and that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. So we're really trying to think about how Fab Labs can become maybe also spaces where there is local production, but on a very low scale, but because we don't want them to become industrialized factories. But we know that there are products for which there is locally a need that can be fulfilled using spaces like Fab Labs, and that can mean customization of projects, that can mean lots of things that also you people at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation are obviously thinking about. Customization products that are maybe not completely made in the Fab Lab. We are thinking about things with companies where some parts of products, will always be made by a big company. Maybe the cooling system of your refrigerator, that's not something you'll probably make in a Fab Lab, although you could do it, but it might take some work. But the handle and the door for your refrigerator you might very easily make, and you might personalize it any way you want. And the idea behind that would be that a company could sell a product that is in a certain sense open source, and then could have multiple spaces like Fab Labs personalize those products on a very local level, again taking away the necessity of moving material around everywhere and really sourcing it locally. I think I'm going to just wrap this up, and then we can talk about some questions that we might have. Just to wrap up, we're really with Fab Connections and with the Fab Economy, so also if you are interested in joining the platform, please contact me. We're trying to develop a vision of, let's say, socio-economic change, where notably the circular economy model will not only come top-down via companies, so the CE100, but also bottom-up via Fab Labs, grassroots initiative communities, any community that might want to work on things like that. And it's because we believe the world really needs to see change, changing the way we consume energy products, and so also changing the way we produce them. I personally think we cannot turn back the way we consume a lot of things. We still want new phones every year, but we can think about the way we build those phones, and we recycle them, or we upcycle them, or we take them apart and put them back together for a new version. And we can work on that together with companies and organizations and Fab Labs as a global community. And so that's what we're trying to do, and that's what I'm trying to initiate with all the different projects we're working on.
Jean-Michel, thank you very much for that kind of crash course in the in what both, I think for a lot of people that'll be maybe their first understanding of what Fab Labs are, but then also the Fab Economy and Fab Connections, and kind of the wider role of Fab Labs. We have had this question in from Jules around where you see the maker movement in 20 years time. I'm going to ask you that at the end, because I've got a few things I want to ask you first.
Okay.
And One for kind of my own curiosity, um, what sort of challenges does the Fab Connections take on? Is there a set of criteria, or perhaps the question should be, what makes a project really interesting for people working in Fab Labs? So if a business comes to you, what sort of things do you look for?
Right. So what we will be looking for are challenges in, for instance, redesigning a product so it can be made more locally, or it can be adapted using materials that can be sourced locally. So the same project but made from different kinds of materials depending on where you want to buy it. We might be looking for projects where people want to save energy in their consumer goods. It's very hard to give you examples in a way because they are so vast in what we can do in Fab Labs. But just very simply, it might start at redesigning an integrated circuit for energy consumption in a product. And the interesting thing, what we can do with that is that we can sort of give the product to multiple project and problem to multiple Fab Labs around the globe, and they are all able to prototype things themselves and even communicate about those prototypes together because they have the same tools. A bigger challenge for us in a company might be, and that is what we're talking about with Enable now, is how we get good quality prosthetic hands to as many people as possible around the globe for a price that's low and that can be affordable for really anyone. Again, producing locally and not globally. Again, making use of local resources. So I think projects that are most interesting for us are projects that are turning around this idea of working together on a global scale and really trying to find local solutions to global problems. I hope that responds to your question.
Yeah, I think it does. And there's some of the examples that you mentioned, like Enable, that I'd like to cover in a few moments. But one question I did have around that you mentioned then. So Fab Labs in different countries or different regions could work on this separately. Is there collaboration between the Fab Labs on particular projects?
So yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the idea for Fab Connections for our company would be to like sort of manage the project. So we are the project manager, but there's different people in different Fab Labs working together on different pieces of the problem, and then we would sort of hand them to the company who wants this problem solved at the end and say, okay, we found numerous solutions to your problem. They might not all be adaptable. They might not be exactly what you're looking for, but according to us, they are good solutions to problems, and then we redistribute what we get from that to all the Fab Labs working with us.
Sure. And the one of the other sessions that we had earlier this week, and that we actually have a headline act next week, is a guy called Mark Miodownik. He's from the Institute of Making at the University College London,
Okay.
And they've set up. Essentially, it is a Fab Lab. You would be very at home there, and it's an interdisciplinary space where they say that anyone, whether you're the cleaner or the dean of the university, you can come in and make use of the tools and materials
That's
available.
wonderful.
How do you ensure that kind of with Fab Economy or Fab Connection projects that you get this interdisciplinary nature? Is that built in?
Well, that's simply stemming from the fact that we know the network very well. So if we would get a question, a request from a company on a specific issue or a problem, if it's electronics, if it's embedded hardware, or if it's software, or if it's furniture design, we are not at all going to contact the same people. We know who is well versed in what, and so we're going to contact those people we know can contribute to a certain problem. This is simply because we're very well ingrained in the network, and we have a lot of people that we work with since a very long time now.
Mm-hmm.
We also follow very closely the Fab Academy, in which people get trained in numerous things, but they always somehow end up having specific skills and certainly specific interests, and I think that's the key, is that people will work better and harder on things if it's interesting to them. And so we know who's working on what globally, and so if we have things that connect to what they are working on, we will connect them together. So we can basically constitute a hand-picked working group on any issue. I say any issue, but a lot, by finding the right people wherever they are on the globe. And then, again, of course, the idea would to not all fly them to the same spot and have them in the same room for a week, but have them work together from wherever they are, so they don't have to actually, use all the CO2 to get to another place.
That's great. I mean, it's quite a. I mean, I can see why there was this enthusiasm when you have this amazing network out there. Yeah. All these very intelligent, practical people working away in labs. That there was this enthusiasm of starting something like the Fab Economy, the .com era.
Okay.
I'm going to take a quick question from. We've got some questions coming in from a range of our viewers.
Yeah.
I've got one here from Matthew Wade, who says, "How did you start this? How did you start this conversation of starting the Fab Economy entity with MIT? So, how did that conversation take place, and how did it progress?"
So that was very funny because, as I pointed out, we started talking together with many people from all over the globe, saying how can we create something that would benefit all Fab Labs and not just ours? How can we do something on a global economy? And we sort of pitched this idea to Neil, and Neil said, okay, you know what, guys, there's too many different projects here. I need a wrapper around this. What is that wrapper? And we said, I don't know, we'll make something. And he said, Neil, for the people who know Neil, he's a very cool person. He sort of gives you homework all the time, even if you're not a student. And so he gave us homework at the Fab 10 festival in Barcelona, and he said, make me a wrapper, show me what you're talking about. If it is interactive, you get bonus points. And so a day and a half later, I came back to him with a website that was fully done. That's the Fab Economy website now. And I said, Neil, well, we'd like bonus points because it's not only interactive. If you get a URL, we can go live. And so he claimed fabeconomy.com, and he pointed to DNS records, and a day later, the website was live. And so the interesting conversation we had with people from there was that we put Fab Lab Economy on the homepage. And as you saw, and as you can see if you go to fabeconomy.com, we removed the lab because Neil said it's not about Fab Labs only, it's about creating a new global economy for everyone. It's a very big statement in a way to make, but in Fab Labs we like to work that way, I guess. We'd like to try and tackle big problems, but very bottom up, and say, let's just try things and let's just see what we can do to maybe help people on the other side of the globe as well as ourselves. And just really, start small and have it grow wherever it will grow and see what it turns into. And I think, Neil and the people from the MIT, they like working like that. They like putting stuff in Petri dishes and then you see what grows. And if it dies down, we'll remove the dish and we'll do a new one. And eventually some things will bloom and some things won't. And I think the same thing will go for Fab Economy. There might be some things that eventually won't really work. And there might be things that really, truly transform the economy and the way we consume, and that's what we're trying to work on.
It's certainly a hugely transformative shift, and one of the questions that we've had in from Andrew Turney, which I'm going to ask you in just a moment, is around kind of the regional differences, and one of the case studies you mentioned during your talk at the start there was around the medical, is it the prenatal medical equipment?
Yeah, it's called the maternity product. It's developed by Kamauga Chingi, a friend of mine who runs the Fab Lab in Nairobi, and he's working very closely with the local hospital and some doctors. They were actually at Fab 10. And they just really like the idea of being able to locally produce solutions while still designing them on a global scale.
So the question we have from Andrew, and I'll kind of have a follow-on question for myself, I guess, is, but he says people in places such as Kenya and Tanzania are great at making things, often from cast-off from the current linear system. Yeah. How do you envisage taking these people through to circular thinking, or how close are they to that already?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think it's actually that we can learn a lot from them on circular thinking, and that we can actually get inspired by many projects. I often say this, but the most inspirational projects often come out of Fab Labs that are in very underdeveloped spaces and that are in places where people have real needs. The Fab Labs in Europe, luckily, are also starting to think about that and work together with these spaces, but we have much less real need to find solutions to our problems. If we need, to give you an example, prostheses for our legs, we all have good insurance, most of us, and we can have one made, and we don't even know how much that costs anymore, and that is a problem on its own. But the Fab Lab in Amsterdam, they developed a project together with the Fab Lab in Yogyakarta on making prostheses for legs for a very low price with locally sourced materials that can be easily adapted to anyone. And I think projects like that are genius. So on the movement and on those people there in Africa, I think we can learn more from them in a way than they from us. Perhaps other than, you know, we also need to start consuming things differently and using our energy differently, and that is a global issue that has nothing to do with whether you're in Tanzania or Nairobi or here in Grenoble in France. That is just a sort of a vision we have of the globe right now. It seems that there's a limited resources because many people just don't realize that that's not the case, and that is a global issue.
Sure. Just to while we're on the subject and with the example of Namibia, and the projects there, that the equipment they're making is I'm sure costs a huge amount from medical companies and is kind of precision engineered and has potentially some regulations about it. How do you ensure quality for such a serious application of things made in Fab Labs?
Sure. You have to realize that it is not everything that can be made in a Fab Lab, and that there are certain products that can help in these medical emergencies often that are quite simple to make. We are talking lights, light fixtures, tables, systems to actually grab the baby when it's still partially inside the mother. Those things, and you are right, often need quality control, but the interesting notion in this is that if we bypass that in some way, we can save more lives. So some people, luckily, and I think I'm one of them on the planet, are starting to say perhaps it's better to just find quick and dirty solutions and save some lives instead of not finding a solution at all because there is no money or means to actually save these people. It's the same with the prosthetic hands I spoke about. They are not replacing the $10,000 prosthetic hand that you might get that has an extremely high precision that, as you said, is precision engineered, that maybe has computer-controlled motors in it, etc. But the solutions Enable and similar organizations provide are maybe quick and dirty fixes, but they transform the life of people, and they actually are more than those people need. In emergencies, we often don't. We just need something that can help take us out of that emergency or help take us out of that bad situation, and it doesn't need to be precision engineered. We often don't realize this.
It's a really great distinction and kind of highlights the gap that Fab Labs are filling, I think.
Yeah.
One of the points you made a couple of minutes ago was around the new ways of consuming and the new ways of using products and using energy. And a question we've had in from Colin Webster, probably inspired by the fact that we have a lot of sessions during the festival about the sharing economy and about the fact that we might rent things or pay for their performance rather than owning them outright. So Colin says, if the sharing economy takes off, continues to take off, and we own fewer items, is there a risk that the growing maker movement will be bypassed?
Perhaps partially. I think that there is space for both, and there is a complementarity in both. There will be products, at least, and this is my personal opinion. Obviously, there will be products that we can share, we can use in a sharing economy. But I believe there will also always be products that will need to be made and consumed by individual consumers, and that cannot be shared. Not necessarily for reasons of not wanting to do so, but hygienic or the simple fact that I need my glasses all the time. I can't share those. So if at a certain point, and I already actually did this, I made, not these, but I made a set of wooden glasses in our Fab Lab. If we can make certain products using the maker movement and as a maker movement, that doesn't mean we can't do the sharing economy. And I think that exactly that both might come from the same space. A lot of people who are active in the maker movement are also very positive about the sharing economy. On a very personal level, I talked recently with the neighbors in my neighborhood, and something I said to my neighbors is, we all need to work in our gardens, and we need tools for that. Can we share those? And I was really happy to see that a lot of people came back with, yeah, Jean-Michel, that's a very good idea. We could maybe even have a space or something where we could share those tools and work together with them. So for me, that is something that is going to be very local for now. I hope it takes off on a much bigger scale. But again, I'm not working on that, and I can only answer that question from a personal vision.
Okay. I just wanted to go back to the business side of things again. So two questions around the way that you're working with businesses and a plan to work with businesses. So one would be that lots of companies, big companies, have internal R&D teams that they've got loads of money in them, and what do they get from the Fab Economy, from Fab Connections that they can't get from within? And the second thing I wanted to just ask is that this, it says it up there, this is the Disruptive Innovation Festival. We're talking about a lot of innovation that's coming from the fringes. Do businesses perceive Fab Labs and Fab Lab innovation as a threat, do you think, or the maker movement generally, or is it something that isn't on the radar yet?
Well, I know that a lot of businesses are thinking about it, and big companies like Airbus, for instance, here in Toulouse in France, Airbus has a form of a Fab Lab installed, as you say, for their R&D group and their team of developers. So it is absolutely certain that we as Fab Labs and as Fab Connections are not going to be giving them tools that they do not have access to. It's often the opposite. Often they have tools that we don't have access to. So perhaps on that, it might be interesting that we might be able to help Fab Labs get access to those tools. And on the other hand, what I think we can offer as Fab Connections, but more as a network of Fab Labs, is another way of doing things, another way of thinking, a way of being globally connected, a way of prototyping, using less energy and more and optimized processes. As I said, I think there's a lot of merit into working together with people that come from multiple backgrounds, and we can offer that. What you see often in companies is that the research and development team is made for a big part of engineers. In Fab Labs, we work not just with engineers, we work with artists, writers, filmmakers, lots and lots and lots of different people with different perspectives on how we should consume and make stuff. And so I think what we offer to companies is not so much information on the technology, although we could also really show them what is being developed, certainly in the open source 3D printing movement. In terms of new technologies, we can take them around the globe, having them meet the big minds between the Fab Lab movement and really talk about what this means even for their company. But it's more a way of showing them different ways of working, different spaces, and different ideas that is interesting.
Okay. And we've got about 19 minutes left. We've got some questions in from around kind of tips and advice for people wanting to get involved in Fab Labs and the maker movement. I want to save those for the end. We've just a bit around a slight diversion, and just to look at the links between the circular economy and Fab Labs on a kind of practical level. So we had a question in from Jules around materials. So one thing that you mentioned was around kind of upcycling of materials, or taking things apart and repairing and putting them back together. What are your favorite examples of information sharing about materials in the maker movement? Obviously, you're a big network of labs. You're all using different types of materials, some locally available, some not,
Yeah.
using them in different ways. How do you share that information?
So there's a lot of information just being shared, and again, this is not very structured, I guess, for now via email. Just people saying, okay, I found this new material. Has anyone worked with it? What can I do with it? What it mostly is, I guess, on information sharing on material is we do it on our websites, as I said, by email, and a lot via the Fab Academy for now. And many of this hinges just on the fact that some, people will be running projects, and it often comes from a need in a specific project. So people might be building, I don't know, a solar oven, and they're trying to locally source material for that, and they will reach out through to the community of Fab Lab saying, okay, who knows anything that I might find where I am that might have these specific, how to say that, these specific qualities in a material that will do what I wanted to do in my project. On top of that, what we're really doing all the time in Fab Labs is just trying new processes and new materials. There's people making CNC machines with concrete. There's people trying to do metal casting with new high temperature silicon and products like that. And there's just a lot of stuff going on in the 3D printing world where people are trying to 3D print with new biodegradable materials, with materials partially made out of wood, with carbon fibers and stuff like that. I think this is something that is not yet structured enough, and that might be a very interesting thing also for somehow integrating that into the Fab economy, is creating a form of a library of materials that is more easily accessible than it is right now, i.e. really contacting the network one-on-one for anyone to access. There is a lot of knowledge going around on material, but again, it's not yet enough structured. I think on that there's also a lot of awareness issues that we would need to work on if we look specifically at 3D printing. Recently there were lots of news organizations saying that in China they 3D printed houses. I didn't really like that for two reasons. It's because it's extrusion of concrete, which is not necessarily a very good material, which is something we've done for a very, very long time. It's just that they automated it, so we call it 3D printing, which is, of course, fine. And I think that these are very innovative and new ways of building things, and we should definitely use those ways. But if we would imagine that as a solution for a global problem, and we would actually imagine printing houses in concrete for everyone on the globe, we would probably use the entire globe in material. So it's a completely ridiculous idea. So we also need to communicate on that, and that is, in a way, more importantly for me right now.
We were hearing from William McDonough earlier this week, one of our headline acts, and he was saying how apparently China have used more concrete in the past 3.5 years than in the history of the United States.
Yeah.
I have no way of telling if that's true, but if it is, then it is absolutely astonishing.
Well, me neither, but I've heard the same, and so more often we hear it, more true it becomes. I think that is, in a way, terrifying.
We're going for another one just on kind of practical level from Andrew Turney. Maybe this is already happening, but can you see a place where Fab Labs can work in cooperation with repair cafes or organizations like iFixit to enable the creation of new parts for broken products, so extending the lifespan of products we use every day?
Yeah, I know this is happening at some places. We are in contact with some repair cafes around us here in Grenoble. We are not actually actively working with them, so I'd love to host them, for instance, in our Fab Lab. But we are already communicating on the fact that people can do this in our Fab Lab. So we've had examples of people coming in and repairing things. An example I quite like was a guy, he came in, he had a pump for his pool that broke down. He opened it up, which is already a very good step. A lot of people don't do this. He opened up the pump and he noticed that it was just a very small piece that was broken. So he contacted the company that built these pumps, and he said, I just need that piece. And they said, well, we don't make that model anymore, and we can't sell you the piece, so you'll have to buy the new pump, which is bigger but better. and it costs a little bit more. And he
Mm.
was like, but no, it's not going to work for me. So he came into our Fab Lab on his own, and he actually ended up using our laser cutter to repair the entire pump. He just sort of redesigned the piece, and he did it himself. So this is stuff that's already happening, and I'd love to see that happening more. On that, I think, coming back to Fab Economy and Fab Connections, that is something I'd really love to work on with companies. So if there's a company out there that would like to imagine products that are built in such a way that if part of it breaks, you can use a local Fab Lab and you can make something new of it, I'd really love to see that in a different way. I gave the example before of a fridge. Imagine that a company would sell fridges without the handle, and if you want a handle, you have to go to your local Fab Lab, and it's going to be personalized and made locally. I think that's awesome. I would immediately buy that fridge. If they also take it back after 2 years and give me back 80% of it in a new jacket, obviously. But so I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and I think many of those opportunities actually need to come from companies who make those products because they need to be designed differently. I mean, there's already a lot of examples that go into that direction. You know, there's phones being designed that are made with brakes and stuff. So we are going into that direction, and I hope, I know that many Fab Labs already do this. They consider themselves repair cafes to a certain extent, and I hope that we'll see more collaboration between those different existing spaces.
And what do you see? You mentioned about the design element, so companies need to design those products differently. What is going to be the motivation for them doing that? At the foundation, when we talk about the circular economy, and with many of the businesses we work with, we see resource price volatility being a factor, for example. I mean, a number of factors, but that being one of the driving factors. What do you see as pushing to companies to design?
Why they would do that?
Yeah.
Well, because it would mean less shipping for them, a local production. So again, it might be such that they end up producing some parts globally. I mean, we can't yet go completely global, sadly. I hope we will in the future. But if they would, if say 50% of their product would be possible to produce locally, it's a lot less transport for them, and so a lot less waste and a lot less energy, and it means a very high level of personalization. And this is something that we've seen for a long time now in the market. We can personalize cars, shoes, anything we want, because we all sort of want the same kinds of things, but not exactly the same. IKEA hacking is a very popular thing also in Fab Lab. So I really think that it would be a big solution for companies to offer wonderfully personalized products and local fabrication to their customers. So I think that would be the main reason for companies to get into that. And then you just have the sustainability issue. If people know that they buy a product that they can, for a big part, repair themselves, I am almost certain that those products will sell quite well, just for that premise. Maybe that's a bold statement to make, but I believe in that.
That's great. We have about 10 minutes left, so I want to run through just by finishing off with a few questions about the Fab Labs generally, and it kind of chimes in with a few of the questions we've had in from our viewers about how they can maybe get involved and what Fab Labs are really like. So, firstly, some people might have some preconceptions about the maker movement. So 3D printing, massive hype, or they might think it's about kind of hacking and maybe the sort of countercultural element. How do you see it?
For me, I think the maker movement is mostly a state of mind. It's a way of looking at the world, and also a way of seeing that what we're doing now is not going to go on for a very long time. We're just going to use up all our resources, and we'll have to find a planet B. And one of the people I work with, he considers that there is no planet B, so we'll have to use planet A for all our solutions, which I find a very nice way of thinking about it in a way. And I think the maker movement is comprised of people who see that, and who are just really excited about being able to find solutions for problems themselves. We see on a very, very low level that it's just very rewarding to be able to make things themselves. We right now have a group of kids in our lab. We call them in French les bricoleurs du lab, which means the tinkerers of the lab, if you will. And we see that there's just so much joy that they experience when they learn how to use a laser cutter or a 3D printer or a small CNC machine to make products for themselves. So I think the maker movement is just a very, very, very big part that it is the joy of making and finding solutions yourself. And now, you know, it's also being hyped, and as you say, 3D printing is being hyped, and I think 3D printing or at least additive fabrication for now is not a solution to many world's problems, although it is for some, but there are other solutions for other problems. It's just another tool in the toolkit we have. So I think all of this will sort of continue to grow and to crystallize, and I don't really know where it's going to, but I think it's a very interesting movement, and I love being part of it. It's just a group of very open-minded people who think differently about the world.
And we've had a question here from Sarah, who wants to know a bit more about what those sort of people are like. What's the diversity of people using Fab Labs? Are you seeing the older generation take part?
Yeah. We have grandfathers come in, make like gifts for their grandchildren and stuff like that. It's interesting. So we are a science center like ASMAT, and we also have people coming in that don't even know we have a Fab Lab. They come in for our exhibits or to learn more about the Science Center, and then they discover a Fab Lab. So sometimes it happens that there are like older people who all their life worked with their hands in like a wood workshop or something, and sometimes they're hesitant. They say, "Oh, these computers, they're going to replace me, or you know, they're going to make so that I'm no longer useful." And I always explain them that's absolutely not the case, and there's so much knowledge that we can still, you know, gain from what they did and how they did things, and the processes are still very similar. And so we often end up really having long talks where they share their knowledge and we share ours, and they end up using computers to learn about new processes, and we end up using you know, chisels and hacksaws to do wonderful wood assembly that they used to know. So it's a really, really enormous group of people that comes in, mostly because our Fab Lab is open 7 days a week, and it's open to the big public. So I mean, right now we have a workshop with kids, we get in companies, we get in lots of students, we get in older people, we get in you know, all the genders, luckily. I think for now, mostly though, I'd have to say that it's a lot of students, because they often discover the Fab Lab through their studies. They have to make something or prototype something. They're looking for solutions, they find us, and then they keep coming back. So again, tonight I'll be showing people how to make longboards. You know, that's young students here in the city who go through the city on their longboard, and they just love the idea of making one themselves. But again, this is also a question of communication. A lot of people are hesitant. They think it's too complicated for them, maybe, and we have to sort of first put them at ease with simple things, and then show them that there's more and more tools, both software and hardware, that are extremely accessible to all ages and all skill levels, and really anyone can make something personalized themselves in a Fab Lab. It's going to be on different scales and different complexity levels.
And something that was clearly apparent from attending Barcelona earlier this year was that the movement is growing so fast.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the kind of top figures in the Fab Lab movement don't really know how many Fab Labs there are out there. Efren would like to take advantage of this massive growth and asks, how do you raise the funds to install a Fab Lab in a country like Venezuela? Maybe there are already some there that you could point it to.
Venezuela, I don't know. I could look into that. I wouldn't be surprised. Not by heart, I don't know. But, well, I mean, this is always hard, and there's no one way to open a Fab Lab, even if we're not third world country. There are Fab Labs that are grassroots movements, so someone who said, you know what, I'll build a 3D printer, I'll put it in my garage, and I'll open my garage to anyone who wants to use it. That sort of becomes a Fab Lab. There are companies installing them, there are organizations installing them. I think if you want to install a Fab Lab in a third world country, just try and contact the existing labs. You can contact me or anyone else from the MIT or from the movement, and we can try and help you find maybe people who are interested in doing the same thing. And then the structure would be to create a project in which we show the merit of a Fab Lab in that localization, and then you'll just have to find sponsors for it. And that is something that can be done. It is a question of human resources and a question of time, but what we mostly need is someone in place. So you'd need someone in Venezuela who is convinced of the idea and who wants to open a Fab Lab. And then it's a question of describing the project and working on it and finding sponsors and opening the Fab Lab. Again, it can start really simple. It can start in a school with just one 3D printer that can be built locally using mostly waste. We would ship them maybe $200 worth of material. So sponsoring for that is easy to find. And then, this way it could start, and then it can continue to grow.
Thank you. Time for two more questions. One, a subject that we haven't managed to engage with that much in this hour, but is a huge topic, and one that one of your peers, Terence Fagan from the United States, will be speaking about next week, is about the educational role of Fab Labs. And how do you think Fab Labs might fit into possible future models of education?
Well, so what we're doing with Fab Connections is these maker camps. So in a way, it is education, but in a less formal space. We're trying to offer people the possibility to learn how to use these new, often digitally controlled tools, while also learning about new cultures, visiting different countries. So that is something we're developing. And next to that, we have the Fab Academy, which is a globally distributed education system. So anyone from across the globe can get the same level of education as people in Boston right now at the MIT, no matter where they are, as long as there's a Fab Lab close to them. So that is a really enormous movement, I think. And I think, but again, that is a personal vision, that we might move away from the extremely formal education we have now, from the fact that you will do a master's during 5 years, and then at the end you have your diploma, and it might be much more fractured, that you would do the Fab Academy, and you would do a course here, and a course there, and a course there, and eventually you have amassed, if you will, your skill set that fits you as a person very well. And you might cross some people in some of these educational spaces, let's call them. They might be MOOCs, they might be things like the Fab Academy, they might be educational workshops that we organize, Fab Labs locally organize. They might be things organized by universities. But again, I think we'll move more and more away from these structures where you follow one kind of education and then that's it, and it's much more fractured. It's the same thing for careers. I spoke to some people about this, and I read a very interesting article. I don't remember the title of it, but it said that the career of the future would be a lot of micro careers. So people won't be working for the same company for 30 years and then they get some flowers and they leave. It's much more that they work for 30 different companies for 1 year, and often at the same time. And I really like that idea, and I feel it might also transform in a way to education.
Because we're actually nearly out of time, so the question I said I'd ask you, one of the first questions I had in about where the maker movement will be in 20 years' time. In a couple of sentences, where do you see it, Jean-Michel?
Well, I'm enough of a futurist to think that we will, at a certain point, probably be uploading our brains onto computational substrates, whatever they are, and we will, at a certain point, conceive of machines that are truly able to make anything like the Star Trek replicators that Captain Janeway offers her tea from. But the thing is, and someone recently from a company here locally in Grenoble reminded me that there are things like black swans, things that happen that we cannot never foresee and that transform the world in a way that we can never imagine. So recently, although I am that kind of futurist, I think I mostly say that I have absolutely no clue, and I sincerely think that it's going to be even crazier than the most weird thing that I can imagine right now. So we'll see. I'm really excited to work in all this right now, and I'm so happy to see all the time on all the social networks and all the things that pass, all these new innovations that come and all these wonderful things, crazy things that people think of. It's a truly inspirational time to be alive. So let's do the same in 20 years. Continue to go on.
That's a fantastic note to end on. So thank you so much, Jean-Michel, for joining us today from your Fab Lab.
Thank you for inviting me.
You've got many people next door making things that we want to get back to. So thanks for joining us, and thank you to everyone for your great questions. There was a really inspiring session on the current and future potential of Fab Labs in the future economy. A couple of points. Next week in Festival Labs at the Disruptive Innovation Festival, on Tuesday the 4th, we have the session I mentioned, the educational potential of Fab Labs with Terence Fagan. Next up at the Disruptive Innovation Festival, we have a design crash course in solving the waste problem. That's with Gaspard Boss from the Perpetual Plastics project. So 3D printing, recycled material, and how many times can that cycle. He's our open mic competition winner, so definitely want to attend. And our next headline act is Jeremy Rifkin, and he'll be speaking about the next industrial revolution, and that takes place at 5 p.m. London time tomorrow. If you want to continue the discussion about any of these topics, head to the Disruptive Innovation Festival Cafe on thinkdiff.co or tweet us with #ThinkDiff. But for now, thanks very much for joining us, and hope to see you again soon.